Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Good Morning Sri Lanka. It's finally a Friday, and just like the expression, thank God it's Friday. It is the 16th of November. We have a very packed show, lots of interesting discussions. But first, like how we normally start off the show, a quick look at the main stories that made it to the major dailies for today, 16th of November, a Friday. Headline reads, Reconsider Impeachment. The United Nations says misuse of disciplinary proceedings against independent judges unacceptable. Yes, Gabriel Knol, who is the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the independence of judges and lawyers, has urged the Sri Lankan authorities to reconsider the impeachment of Chief Justice Shirani Bandaranaike. Also, a little bit into the same story, the PSC sent her the motion signed by 117 United People's Freedom Alliance MPs, telling CJ to appear on November 23. Chief Justice Shirani Bandaranaike has been noticed to appear before Parliamentary Select Committee on November 23 to answer charges in the impeachment motion against her, according to a senior PSC member. Another headline reads, Government nurses on medical leave. Some 5,000 nurses attached to the GNOA launched a token strike yesterday, as government hospitals were severely affected yesterday when nearly 5,000 nurses attached to the government's Nursing Officers Association launched a token strike, urging the government to grant their long outstanding demands. It's bad news. Hopefully they'll be back at work by today. And in some interesting news, and this is the quote, if my children want Lamborghinis, I'll buy them some. Mervin. Minister Mervin Silva said yesterday that if his children wanted Lamborghinis, he would buy them some. Some are holding on to Lamborghinis and voicing their protest. If my children take up motor racing, I would also buy them Lamborghinis. And I too would use one, he said, commenting on the reduction of duty on racing cars in the budget proposal for 2013. Now, moving on to the business section, interestingly enough, a reaction to that quote, Harsha revs up parliament against racing car booty in budget 2013. The controversial move allowing tax-free racing cars in Sri Lanka was brought into the limelight, with opposition legislator Dr. Harsha De Silva joining the budget debate. According to UNP spokesman on economic affairs, MP Dr. De Silva, the president's move to allow a tax concession on racing cars will be a pacifier for the rich kids of the politicians, which is less than 0.1% of the total population. And finally, a quick look at our sports section. Stunning SLC lapse could cost millions. No insurance cover obtained for the current series against New Zealand despite stormy weather. Officials of the financially struggling Sri Lanka cricket have made another colossal blunder by failing to insure the heavy rain affected the current tour of Sri Lanka by New Zealand, by the New Zealand team, according to sources. So there you go. Those are some of the major stories that made it to today's headlines. And for the couple of episodes already of GMSL, we have been discussing about the event that will start on the 25th of November and extending to the 10th of December, which happens to be United Nations International Human Rights Day. This is on the Forum on Violence Against Women, and we are very privileged to have with us a gentleman inside the studio. He was, not too long ago, a part of the academe at the University of Peradeniya. Now he is a part of the Forum as a volunteer, as an individual, as a member of the male gender. We have with us Professor Dr. Vijaya Jalatilaka. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
And I know this is not your first time to be part of the Forum on Violence Against Women. You have been for a couple of years now, very vocal about. And for this year, you are concentrating on engaging men on the movement on violence against women, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So first, tell us, sir, what made you decide on taking up the cause a couple of years back?
I hope you will not get annoyed with me when I start with this very personal thing. I think very early on in my life, I was born in a small village close to Bibile. I realized that it was definitely beneficial, a privilege, and lots of advantages being born a boy. I have 5 sisters and 4 brothers, and so this was a very early realization. I saw that I had certain possibilities that my sisters did not have, but then this awareness was there, but then I went to university. I was in only all boys school. I went to university, I studied agriculture, then I went to do sociology after that. Then I had the privilege of course, looking at this issue from an academic perspective. And I learned a lot, and I came back and I started teaching again at the university and at the postgraduate level, and I introduced some of the first courses on gender there. And I realized that it was very well received by...
Always keeping us informed. Of course, that was News First with breaking news, and we are in discussion with Dr. Vijay Tilaka. This is regarding the forum that's happening, that's starting on the 25th of November, and it's the Forum on Violence Against Women. Sir, before we went for the breaking news, we were talking about how we define gender-based violence. If you like to recap.
Telling me that it is violence meted out on women just because they are women, and this violence can take many forms, and we are generally aware of physical violence, that is where a woman is actually injured or the victim is injured, but there can be verbal abuse, there can be psychological abuse, there can be deprivation and prevention of people from enjoying the usual basic freedoms that they have. And in today's world of technology, there is unsolicited pornographic information that is actually sent to women, letter forms, text forms, and now you can actually create pornographic pictures of women, and that can be very abusive of a woman, and it can be very, very traumatic for a woman to be subject to it. And that is possible because they have internalized and we socialize women not to react to these things in a violent way. So in a violent society, then they become more victimized because of their socialization also. So it can take many forms, and it continues in society.
Based on your experience, sir, is there a pattern that has been common for years, like where it normally happens, when it normally happens? Is there a particular age group vulnerable to this, a particular location? Does it mostly happen at home, at workplace, in the street? Is there a pattern to this?
Interestingly, no. As far back as 1980s, there was a study done by Professor Kiribamune and Professor Vaidhyamali Samarasinghe in Kenda, where they actually did a study to find out what are the factors, where does this happen.
The year?
In 1980s, in late 80s.
Okay.
Yeah. And then what I was also associated with that very thoroughly, but what they found out was that it's there no matter what the economic status is, where the location is, whether it's urban, rural, plantation, whether people are very religious, educated, professional background. This didn't explain. So then they dug deeper into the data, and what they found was that children who grow up in environments or families where there is a lot of violence and there is no negotiation, and they tend to grow up internalizing that behavior. So in today's society, what you find is that this absence of violence, absence of the same kind of power that men have, and also the level of tolerance around, there is really no zero tolerance for gender-based violence. So it happens wherever men and women interact. It can be at home, it can be at workplace, it can be in public transport where it's a huge problem, and anywhere they actually interact. And the problem is that there isn't much awareness, there isn't much research done to establish this as a fact, and generally this myths that it's not here. We are a very cultured society of 2005.
We're very respectful to our women.
All that, and that's just it's a surface, and it's there, and it's not spoken about.
Okay, so Doc, the research was done in late 80s. It is already 2012. How prevalent is this still? How is it getting worse? Or is it because
it's getting more reported? I think people are getting more bold. I think they're aware of the support services that are there. They're aware of the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act. They are becoming more kind of legally aware of rights and opportunities that are there to react against this abuse. So I think it's more to do with awareness than about increasing. But the quality of violence, if I may use that word, has also taken drastic change. That's what Women in Need research and their cases report, that there's a lot of much more sexual abuse, violence, and the use of all kinds of instruments that should not be the case. But as I said, we don't have the evidence to say that the incidence has increased. But if you look at historically, people have written about Sri Lankan culture hundreds of years back, particularly American and Western travelers who came here, and they observe this society to be quite tolerant of violence. And that is something that is difficult to understand in a country that has had so many hundreds of years of Buddhist influence. And so there is a surface level of peace, but there's underneath that there's a lot of tolerance and abuse of people who are disempowered. It can be women, it can be the poor, it can be the disenfranchised minorities, etc. And that's kind of taken up, at least in the case of gender-based violence. Being macho is also considered to be part of being tough and rough and being able to abuse others. So the macho-ness goes on within the male gender as well as between males and women. So it's mostly learned, and we continue to perpetuate it through a learned and glorification of violence.
That is a very good point. That it's a learned, and we continue to glorify on that idea that of certain definitions. And for the past discussion that we had for representative for the forum, it's always been mentioned that also part of the problem is because we live in a very patriarchal society where men are favored, really. So how are you trying to convince the other members of your gender that this is something that they need to take up? Because physically you are far stronger, and economically you are of an advantage. If I think the last data is for every dollar that a man is earning, the woman gets 70 cents, which is a lot better than the former data of 60 cents. So how is it easy to convince them that this is there are certain things that they need to do for a woman and to really think of her as an equal? Is that I think we should take a step backwards and ask ourselves, what is a proper man? Who is a real man? I think the power or the use of power or the advantage of it is not to abuse what you have. I think it's said in training of police officers and officials who carry firearms is that you're actually influential, you're actually good to the extent that you don't use your firearm. And so then it is the ability to communicate, it is the ability to negotiate, it's the ability to empathize that actually makes a man a real man. I think we need a redefinition of what a man is. How open are they with the redefinition of what is a man?
I think it's a learned process. I think it's necessary to catch people when they are young, children at that age, and also at a later stage also you can do it. I think it's a matter of making society and individuals in society be able to be more empathetic, not at a surface level but really deep inside, and that empathetic learning takes place with the kinds of social encounters that you have, that you are actually interacting with the disadvantaged, with the victims. And very often we kind of don't allow children and adults to learn and see the victims and to understand why this has happened. So I think it is through that kind of a very internalized, intense learning that you can take that you can change people. And I personally don't feel that having huge programs where hundreds of people participate, where there is top-down or one-way communication, you can actually change, you can create awareness, but actually internalize where an individual takes a decision. My behavior has to change, so the change has to come from the individual, and that's a very intense, very personal kind of a learning.
That's true.
And there you have to that we can show that it can be a win-win situation. It's not that you're giving up something, you do give up and somebody else benefits from it, but on the whole it's a win-win situation. And then what you want is a peaceful home, you need a peaceful school, you need a peaceful university, and we need a peaceful work environment where everybody actually participates equally, and then everybody benefits, and that kind of message has to go out.
That is a